Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blanks and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
All right, here we go. A long week, Jack. Hello and welcome to the GSMC television podcast. We're part of the mighty GSMC podcast network, and I'm your flash flood dodging host in the DMV, Howard Fletcher. I am joined as always by my trusted engineer, Jack, the Black Pug. And we are positively honored and thrilled to be here with you once again. If you're new to the show, I'd like to give you a very warm welcome. Thank you for giving us a try. We appreciate it. We know there is a bunch of media out there that you can choose from. You can watch, you can audiobook, all of that stuff. So we're very honored that you chose to let us mumble in your ear for a while. We aim to please. Stick around. I'm sure you'll hear something you like. That's what we're going to aim for. We want you to keep coming back. And if you're one of our loyal return listeners, you know how we feel about you. You are truly the reason that I am here. So let's all have some fun today. We have another jam-packed show for you. Amazon Prime gets in the business of Boo. HBO signs Oprah and a bevy of stars to be in an original film, as they are in the habit of doing. The View retools, old school style. The Food Network is giving us fewer Christmas cookies this year. That's depressing. You know, I'll always bring you breaking news. I love breaking news. And Lovecraft Country finally has its premiere. But first, let's get started with some breaking DCU for you news. Speed and star power. Those are the two clear goals for the DC Fandome virtual event on August 22nd, which, my friends, is the day that this podcast drops. So it's today if you're listening to it fresh. And they released the full schedule for the Fandome a week previous. So I am I'm giving this to you now. I'm not going to give you the schedule because it'll be old news by then, but this is what they were planning to do today. Over 100 hours of content stretching across the film, TV, and comic book properties from DC Entertainment will unfold over a 24-hour period on the Saturday event, including panels featuring the filmmakers and casts of The Batman, Wonder Woman 1984, The Suicide Squad, and the Snyder Cut of the Justice League. And the cast of the TV series, including DC's Legends of Tomorrow, Batwoman, Ruby Rose probably won't be there, Black Lightning, and The Flash. Most of these panels, however, will run just 15 to 30 minutes in length. The panel for the upcoming feature film version of The Flash, with filmmakers Andy and Barbara Muschietti, starring Ezra Miller and screenwriter Christina Hodson, will clock in at a speedy 10 minutes. What are they going to do? Introduce everybody and say, that's all, folks? The briefness of that panel could also be due to unresolved questions surrounding a video of Miller appearing to choke a woman outside an Iceland bar in March. Well, that could be true, although 10 minutes is just ridiculously brief. I don't care if your star is caught up in a scandal or not. What are you going to say in 10 minutes? Also, and I've gone on the record here on this podcast, Ezra Miller is not my first. I didn't like him in any of the, the Justice League or, his brief appearance in Batman v Superman, whatever. I think the guy on the Flash of the Arrowverse, the guy who plays the Flash in that, is better than Ezra Miller. And I'm not saying he should be the guy in the movie, but I don't know why they decided to cast Ezra Miller. He just is not the right guy. Anyway, the event will also include a performance by Chris Daughtry of American Idol fame and his song, Waiting for Superman, and the premiere of the animated feature, Superman, Man of Tomorrow, featuring Darren Criss, Zachary Quinto, and Alexandra Daddario. The 24-hour online event will be broken up into 6 distinctive areas. The Hall of Heroes, where all the movie-based panels will appear. The Watchverse, featuring 4 virtual theaters housing TV panels, and the Blurred and Bougie House, dedicated to Black nerd culture. Don't get me started on that. And the U-Verse, dedicated to fan art and cosplay. Insiderverse, featuring behind-the-scenes content on the Warner Brothers Studios lot. Funverse, featuring access to digital comics and merchandise. And the DC Kids Fandome, a kid-safe, interactive environment. The full schedule of the DC Fandome is on the DC Fandome website. So just Google DC Fandome. If you're listening to this on Saturday late in the day or after Saturday the 22nd, you have missed it, but I'm sure you can go to the website. I anticipate that they will have videos on that website of these panels, or they're probably going to be on YouTube, and you can Google them. That's about all I got to say, but I don't understand the Blurred and Bougie one. And, for listeners of this show, I'm a black male, but I just don't understand what that's about. All right. Here is some CBS Deaf is More news. Viacom CBS shares were up more than 5% in trading Friday, reflecting renewed investor interest in the company following the death earlier this week of Chairman Emeritus Sumner Redstone. The movement for Viacom CBS shares comes on a down day overall so far for the NASDAQ index. News of Redstone's death on August 11th at the age of 97 has sparked speculation that his successor, Viacom CBS Chairman Sherry Redstone, may now be more inclined to sell the media conglomerate that her father built starting in the late 1980s. For the year to date, Viacom CBS shares are down 33%, in keeping with massive declines for most media stocks amid the pandemic-driven business disruptions. The report that surfaced on Thursday about Viacom CBS striking a bundle deal with Apple TV Plus for all of its CBS All Access and Showtime streaming services is also seen as a driver of Friday's stock movement. Viacom CBS shares hovered about around $28 per share after 2 hours of trading on Friday. Now, the stock fell below $12 at the start of the pandemic lockdown in mid-March, but it's risen to over 20 since late May. But since late May, it's gone up 8. So definitely on the upswing. I don't know how much Sumner Redstone, at this point in his life, in his 90s, was involved in the day-to-day. CBS, was like the other 3 broadcast networks and having their troubles dealing with the transition to the multi-cable world and now into the streaming world. But Viacom CBS, even though I don't have CBS All Access, and CBS All Access doesn't necessarily have the best programming on it, it has some decent programming on it, they were kind of ahead of the curve. CBS All Access was out a full year or more before they even started talking about Peacock. So I don't know why it's seen as this thing being such a big deal. I think It's more the fact that Apple TV and Showtime streaming services said they were going to buy some of this stuff because, like I said, the program is worth it. So maybe, what do you say about investors? But I don't think it. I think when it was the stocks fell below $12 at the beginning of the pandemic, I'm not somebody who plays the market, but that would have been a good buy because I think that was well undervalued. I don't think that it really should have been that low, and I'm glad it's moving up. So we will see. But that's what's happening in the world of CBS. So let's end this segment with some Clueless Reboot news. Peacock, which I just talked about, has landed the series reboot of Clueless, centered on this character Dion for development. The Untitled comedy series, which I don't know why they're calling it Untitled if it's a Clueless reboot. Maybe they're saying it's a show like Clueless. But anyway, it's not officially titled Clueless. The Untitled comedy series is described as now check this out, a baby pink, bisexual, blue-tinted, tiny sunglasses wearing, oat milk latte, and Adderall-fueled look at what happens when Queen Bee Cher disappears and her lifelong number 2, Dion, steps into Cher's vacant Air Jordans. Man, how many references are you going to have? How does Dion deal with the pressures of being the most popular girl in school while also unraveling the mystery of what happened to her best friend? Inquiring minds want to know about this. News of the show's development was first reported last October, though no network or streaming service was attached at the time. Jordan Redout and Guy Hickey will serve as writers and executive producers on the project. Oh boy, CBS Television Studios will produce. There you go, there's another CBS show. The stock is rising again. The film version of Clueless debuted in 1995. Of course, it starred Alicia Silverstone, we all remember that, as the iconic character Cher. Stacey Dash, now a regular Fox News contributor, is Dion. It is now considered a cult classic. A TV adaptation aired on ABC and then on UPN from 1996 to 1999 for 3 years. Rachel Blanchard played Cher in the series, with Dash reprising the role of Dion because Stacey Dash gets no roles. So she was happy to get that. In 2018, Clueless the Musical debuted on stage in New York with no Stacey Dash. Redout and Hickey's past credits include the NBC revival of Will and Grace, which did quite well, I might say, and as well as shows like The Muppets and Grownish. I don't know about Grownish, but The Muppets, you can bet on The Muppets. Binkeroff, who's one of the long-standing producers in that whole world, has had a relationship with CBS Television Studios, having created CBS series American Gothic and worked on shows like The Good Wife, Elementary, Jane the Virgin, and No Tomorrow for the studio. Okay, so why am I talking about this? This is why. This is now the latest example of a female-focused 90s staple that will get the fresh take focused on a black character. It was previously announced that Tracee Ellis Ross was set to voice the lead character in the animated comedy Jodie, which is a spin-off of Daria. That show is currently set up at Comedy Central after originally being in the works at MTV. Now, listeners to this show know what they can probably anticipate what I'm about to say. Do I like diversity on television? Love it. Am I glad that these black actresses and actors and producers and directors and anyone who's attached to these projects is getting work? Over the moon about that. So, what could possibly be wrong with this? I'll tell you. It's lazy. That's what. If you want to write a show based on a type of story, that's done all the time. Writers will tell you there are about 6 or 7 plots. Every story is about the same. You just have to change the circumstances and the characters, but there's not a whole lot of originality, especially if you go outside of the Bible and Shakespeare. There's not a whole lot more you can do. except for add maybe aliens and laser beams, to make it a little updated. So why are you taking these properties that have been established and that are iconic, like they said, the character of Cher and Clueless, cult film, why are we just painting that black? Obviously, somebody was creative enough to write this script that Alicia Silverstone turned into something, and they were able to spin off in all these different mediums. Let's do that again. But I have a good novel idea. We'll just have a black cast, or at least a black main character on a new character. How about that? That's all. This is lazy. So what's my problem with this? My problem with this is this. I'm not going to pat you on the back for painting something black that's already established, that's very lazy, and you say, I'm doing this in the spirit of diversity. You're not doing it in the spirit of diversity. You are, kind of. But just making something of color doesn't make it diverse. What you need to do is invest the same amount of energy you did to make an original property and consider casting all kinds of people into those roles. That's all. And that seems to be the thing that Hollywood is just very hesitant to do. And the people that are doing it can't get their stuff, they become people that have to work independently. That's why Spike Lee has to work so independently. Because he's not just, if Spike Lee wanted to make a black version of The Godfather, he could probably get all kinds of financing. But he's not doing that. He's writing original content. So he's got to go search it out. So anyway, that's what's going on with Clueless. Those of you who like that character, I hope you enjoyed the show. Next, we're going to be talking about The View, a show that I don't watch, but has been around for quite a while, and they're about to retool old school. I'll be right back. Go get some refreshments. We're going to pay some bills, and I thank you for listening. All right, back. I've calmed down, Jack. It's all good. Sarah Haynes. Well, Sarah Haynes will be returning to The View in September as a co-host for season 24, folks. 24 of the ABC daytime talk show. That's a long time. Sarah Haynes, who is 42, I didn't just transpose those numbers, it's just a natural thing, is no stranger to the Hot Topics table. She served as a View co-host for 2 seasons, from the fall of 2016 through the summer of 2018, where she offered her takes on the headlines of the day, pop culture, and celebrities. Prior to The View, Haynes had served as a lifestyle anchor for Good Morning America Weekend. A representative at ABC declined to comment when asked by several organizations if and when she would start. Haynes will fill the seat at the table left by Abby Huntsman, who exited the show in January of 2020. In the last few months, Haynes has filled in occasionally on The View, which has had its co-hosts Whoopi Goldberg, Joy Behar, and Meghan McCain and Sunny Hostin engaging in virtual debates from home due to the coronavirus. Well, The View has changed out hosts before. Why is this important now? Why is this on this podcast? Well, election years have always led to surges in viewership for The View. The talk show's ratings have been up overall under Donald Trump's presidency, as viewers have been tuning in to make sense of the latest scandals coming out of the White House. So that means every day. When Haynes first arrived at The View in 2016, the show was struggling to forge a new identity following the revolving door of co-hosts and the retirement of creator Barbara Walters in 2014. There wasn't much to talk about during the Obama years, folks, because everything was going pretty smoothly. Haynes was appointed to the show as Ben Sherwood, the president of Disney, ABC television group at the time, had the idea to recruit more Good Morning America talent, including Paula Ferris, to The View. Why? Because on Good Morning America, they got to talk day in and day out about anything. They'll talk about Girl Scout cookies or whatever. And because there wasn't much happening, they're like, put those people on there who know how to talk just to fill up time. Then in 2016, Sherwood, an ABC News executive, mandated that Haynes abandon The View for a third hour of Good Morning America called Good Morning America Day with Michael Strahan. The new offering, which was later rebranded as Strahan, Sarah, and Kiki with Kiki Palmer, flopped in the ratings. I can't imagine why. It was canceled in March, leaving Haynes without a TV home. In the early days of The View, Barbara Walters thought her talk show could survive maybe one or two panel changes. But over its 23-year history, listen, The View has had almost as many cast shakeups as Saturday Night Live. Haynes is the third co-host to attempt a comeback. In 2014, our good friend Rosie O'Donnell tried a second stint on The View following a successful turn as moderator in 2006 and 2007, which lasted for 5 months before she quit. And in 2015, Behar, who had been fired from The View in 2013 when daytime executives foolishly thought that the show had become too political, returned, helping usher in a successful post-Walters era. So we will see what happens on The View. It is a strong daytime show, and maybe Haynes coming back on the scene will help it. Who knows? Here is some Big O on HBO news. HBO has set up an all-star lineup of featured performers in the adaptation of Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me. The HBO's version's cast will include the great Angela Bassett, Oprah Winfrey, of course, Black Lives Matter founder Alicia Garza, Joe Morton, Felicia Rashad, The Roots' Tariq Black Thought Trotter, Courtney B. Vance, Pauletta Washington, and additional castings will be announced at a later date. Originally adapted and staged by the Apollo Theater in 2018, the special will combine elements of that production, including readings from Coates' book, and will once again be directed by Apollo Theater executive producer Kamala Forbes. It will also incorporate documentary footage from the actor's home life, archival footage, and animation. The special, which is currently in production under COVID-19 guidelines, debuts this fall on HBO, and it will be available to stream on HBO Max. It is described as an exploration into Black Americans' fraught history within the country and questions including what it means to live in a black body. The book is written in the style of a letter to Coates' teenage son, telling story of Coates' experience growing up in Baltimore's inner city, his growing fear of daily violence against blacks in the community, and his notion that the structure of American society supports white supremacy. I am looking forward to that because I think HBO is very responsible in the way it produces, or they employ the correct producers to handle what could be incendiary or even exploitative material in a very responsible manner. So I think it's going to be good information that's going to be presented in there. I have not read this particular book by Ta-Nehisi Coates. I probably should, but anyway, when Big O gets involved, a lot of eyes go to it. So once again, HBO scores a big one. Here is some Blumhouse Goes Prime news. Now, this is something I told you guys that I think streaming is tailor-made for. Amazon Studios is getting in on the business of scares. The company is partnering with Blumhouse, the production empire created by Jason Blum, on a slate of 8 spine-chilling horror genre films. The movies, part of a program titled Welcome to the Blumhouse, will share a common theme centering around a family and love as redemptive or destructive forces, but each will have a unique vision and voice. It's the first thematically connected original series from Amazon. The first 4 films will premiere in October, with the rest of the slate being unveiled in 2021. The Lie and Black Box are launching on October 6th, and Evil Eye and Nocturne are debuting on October 13th. I like the titles, and I like Blumhouse. Here's a quote. "We are excited to launch Welcome to the Blumhouse with this exhilarating and provocative slate of original films for the first time ever on Prime Video. This collection of diverse and emerging filmmakers was a thrill to put together with our wonderful partners at Blumhouse Television," said Julie Rappaport, co-head of movies for Amazon Studios. As she continues, "These chilling stories have something for everyone, ready to fright and delight genre fans and newcomers alike, and we are excited to share them with our global Prime Video customers," end quote. Evil Eye is being executive produced by Priyanka Chopra Jonas, which is one of the Jonas brothers' wives. Although she obviously, I think she's Deepak Chopra's daughter. She has a lot going on. Her claim to fame is not that she's Nick Jonas or one of the Jonas brothers' wives, but that's where she gets her last name now. And up-and-coming filmmakers Ilan Dasani and Rajiv Dasani are directing the film about a seemingly perfect romance that turns dark when a mother becomes convinced that her daughter's new boyfriend has a sinister connection to her own past. It's never good when the mother gets involved. Joey King, who is known for being in The Kissing Booth in The Act, Peter Skarsgård, and Muriel Enos of The Killing are starring in The Lie, written and directed by Veena Sud, who was the director and writer of 7 Seconds and The Stranger. In The Lie, 2 parents must deal with a grisly aftermath when their teenage daughter confesses to killing her best friend. Boy, I like both of these already. Zoo Kirk is helming Nocturne, making her first feature film debut. It's starring Sydney Sweeney of Euphoria and Madison Eisman of Jumanji, The Next Level, and Ivan Shaw of Insecure. Nocturne takes place at an elite arts academy where a timid music student uncovers a mysterious notebook that once belonged to her recently deceased classmate. Okay, see what that's about. Directed by Emmanuel O.C. Kofour Jr. and written by O.C. Kofour Jr. and Stephen Herman is Black Box. That's the last movie that's going to debut this fall. Black Box is about a single father who, after losing his wife and memory in a car accident, undergoes an experimental treatment that makes him question who he really is. We'll see what that's about. Felicia Rashad is in that one, so we shall see. Here's another quote. "We are beyond excited that the visions of these talented filmmakers will finally be seen by genre fans around the world, especially during this time when people are seeking to escape and be enthralled. And we love the innovative idea of programming like the classic drive-in or repertory theater experience," said Marcy Wiseman and Jeremy Gold, co-presidents of Blumhouse Television. Amazon has been incredible partners, linking arms and supporting the creative visions throughout the process of making these films. Well, this is why I like it, and I've said this before. Well, during this time when a lot of movies that would have gone to the theater decided to go straight to video on demand, I think that most, the lion's share, I'm talking about 80%, if not more, of horror movies, which I love, are going to go to video on demand or streaming. Why? Because they're inexpensive to make. The type of special effects that they usually need don't warrant a big screen or big sound. You don't need that. So I just think that now here's the downside of doing it this way, or for producers. Horror movies used to be a way to make a lot of cash really fast. Like movies like Saw and others, they were pennies. they didn't cost anything to make. Cloverfield, all they didn't make any cost really, a couple million to make, if that. Some, came in under $1 million, and they went on to make hundreds of millions of dollars. That's like a windfall. It's very rarely, even the blockbuster films make money, windfall money like that. But I don't know if the theaters are going to be accessible to them anymore. I don't think if that kind of money is going to be there anymore. So how can you make money off of these films and have it be enjoyable for the audience to go back to? Well, I think that streaming is the answer. And so I think you're going to see a lot of these horror people like Blumhouse, and Blumhouse does this quite well. That's why they had the foresight to say, look, let's sign an 8-picture deal with Amazon, and we'll just throw all of our stuff on Amazon, and people will buy it. Well, that's what they're going to do here. So I'm looking forward to this. It's a way to consume a lot of horror very easily. And I think you're going to get, just like she mentioned, she called it the repertory film experience, just like I used to go to a lot of art house movies. That's what we used to call it. Independent movies, got that name in the 90s. I just think that, a lot more creators and filmmakers are going to have the opportunity to make their films and put them on, because they don't have to worry about having to get them distributed. They're not going to have, it's going to be very easy to sell them to Netflix and to Amazon and to whoever else wants to get these films and put them on. And so this is a good thing for the consumer, and I'm looking forward to it. Next, well, there are not going to be as many Christmas cookies this year at the Food Network. I'll let you know about that when I come back. We're going to pay some bills, go get another stiff drink. I'll see you soon.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
You like sugar cookies? I like them. I don't like them with icing. Do you like them, Jack? Well, I don't like them that way. All right, we're back. The Food Network is cutting down the number of episodes for its upcoming 4th season of its holiday series, Christmas Cookie Challenge, because of a crew member that tested positive for COVID-19 this week. Now, this season will be 6 episodes long instead of its usual 8 episodes long. Sonic Dog, the producers of the show, they released a press release that I got, and this is what it said, quote, "At episode 6, unfortunately, an employee tested positive. After contact tracing, the producers decided to wrap production. The series was not shut down, but any outside party, rather Sonic Dog, elected to wrap 3 days early to allow staff, crew, and cast to return home as opposed to extending the schedule," end quote. Now, the Christmas Cookie Challenge is co-hosted by Eddie Jackson and Ray Drummond, and it was shot at Coyote Studios outside of New Orleans. Before production began on August 5th, Sonic Dog established COVID safety protocols in partnership with an on-set medical and testing partner, according to the statement as well. The cast and crew of 98, damn, that's a lot for a cookie show. Anyway, all 98 crew members were tested for coronavirus before the starting of the shoot. And 2 local crew members tested positive, and they were replaced. With regular testing in place, people were tested either 1, 3, or 6 times a week, depending on their jobs. After a round of tests on August 11th, one crew member who'd come into contact with many other members of the production tested positive. 6 of the show's 8 episodes had been shot, so instead of pausing production on the show and figuring out who was infected and who wasn't, starting up again, they decided just to do a shortened season. Crew members who were exposed on set were told they can be tested again next week. This summer, Food Network, which pivoted to self-shoot programming during the coronavirus shutdowns, and we talked about that on this podcast, has seen a rating spike in recent months. People are at home learning how to cook. Well, the network has selectively restarted on-location and studio production on some of its shows. Guy Fieri's Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, Robert Irvin's Restaurant Impossible both shot new seasons on location with reduced crews. And other holiday programming, Halloween Baking Championship, Holiday Baking Championship, Kids Baking Championship, and Spring Baking Championship began filming last month at a resort in California, with the cast and crews quarantining at the resort. Those shows have been filming outside with no cases of coronavirus. So obviously the key to keeping these things up and running, or one of them, is to not cook indoors, which is a bit tough, but the British Baking Show does it. Great British Bake Show. So my girlfriend would be very happy to hear that will probably still be up and running. Here is some Ellen DeGeneres got some explaining to do news. Ellen DeGeneres. Well, her resident DJ, Stephen Twitch Boss, has been named co-executive producer at the daytime talk show. 2 individuals familiar with the decision told sources, one of them being Variety, the other one being The Hollywood Reporter, but it got out that Twitch is now an co-executive producer. The news was announced during a highly emotional address from DeGeneres to her Ellen Show staff on Monday, where she confronted months of reports of a toxic work environment and racism. Now, I have been reporting the story as it comes in. I told you I would bring updates as they come. This is the latest. The host expressed a desire to come back strong in the forthcoming 18th season of her syndicated franchise, which is now a Warner Brothers TV institution. Well, Ellen says they're going to have a renewed commitment to diversity, which is surprising since I thought they always had a commitment to diversity. DeGeneres said Boss, that's Twitch, has already been helpful in that measure. The promotion will give the MC more influence in both programming and the working culture, one insider added. Less than a week ago, Boss told Us Weekly that, quote, obviously there's some things to address, but from my standpoint and from countless others, there's been love. I just leave it at that until there's a time when we can address it more publicly, end quote. And that's why Twitch is an executive producer. He knows when to talk and when not to talk. A July report from BuzzFeed contained a range of racist accusations about the behavior toward staffers of color. On the Monday call, DeGeneres said that reports left her heartbroken. Now, Variety exclusively reported that DeGeneres also announced that a trio of top producers who had been accused of sexual misconduct were fired. Executive producers Ed Glavin and Kevin Lehman and co-executive producer Jonathan Norman were all ousted following damning allegations raised in recent reports by BuzzFeed and Variety. Ellen veterans Mary Connolly, Alan Lassner, and Derek Westervelt will remain at the show as executive producers alongside DeGeneres. Connolly, Lassner, and Westervelt have been with the show since its inception in 2003. Boss also appears on the variety series Ellen's Game of Games alongside DeGeneres and hosts the series Disney's Fairy Tale Weddings with wife Allison Holker for Disney+. Also credited as a choreographer and longtime dancer, Boss's film credits include Blades of Glory, Hairspray, and Magic Mike XXL. Well, I don't know. Well, actually, I do know what it takes to be an executive producer. And sometimes it just takes being somebody who keeps the set in line and is very nice. And Twitch seems to apparently get the yes vote in that department. So I'm very happy for him. Congratulations, Twitch. But, you know, this is very contrary to what Ellen says her image is. So she's going to have a little bit of reconstruction to do. Thankfully, there were no allegations directly aimed at Ellen. So this might have been nipped in the bud right at the right time. We shall see. You know I will keep you informed. Here is some sputtering box office news. After prolonged closures due to the coronavirus pandemic, movie theaters in the United States and other parts of the world are slowly turning the lights back on, welcoming patrons and hearing their cash registers ring again. In modern times, opening weekend ticket sales have been the benchmark of success for any given movie. But in a post-pandemic era, that metric will be less relevant. Listen, for one thing, movies are limiting capacity to ensure social distancing. They're putting a cap on the number of tickets that can be sold over a weekend. But beyond that, studios and movie theater owners will have to focus more on word of mouth. It's not just about the film itself. They'll be relying on customers telling others that they felt safe seeing a movie in the theaters at a time when coronavirus is still rapidly spreading in many areas in the U.S. For those reasons, distributors aren't expecting new releases to start with a bang. Though box office reporting has started to quietly ramp up in the last few weeks, last weekend is perhaps the most significant yet since movie theaters first closed in March. Two new movies, which we have spoken about on this show, the SpongeBob movie Sponge on the Run from Paramount and Russell Crowe's Unhinged from Solstice Studios, began to play in Canada. Both got off to a slow start, screening in just a few hundred theaters across the country, but plan to expand to more locations in coming weeks. SpongeBob, the third feature film based on everyone's favorite absorbent underwater fry cook, amassed $900,000 in 300 theaters in Canada. The animated kids movie scrapped its theatrical release in the U.S., where it will launch on premium video on demand before landing on CBS All Access. That's why we're talking about this here. The streaming service, which is owned by the studio's parent company, Viacom-CBS. Now, Unhinged also debuted in about 300 theaters, but it generated only $582,000, almost half of what SpongeBob made. I want to repeat that. Unhinged made half of what SpongeBob made. All right. Solstice Studio head of U.S. distribution, Sherry Hardison, said drive-in and suburban locations have been moving ticket sales. Quote, it's a little upside down from a traditional release, end quote, she pointed out. Mark Gill, the president and CEO of Solstice Studios, said opening weekend numbers for Unhinged represented a good, solid start. He's aware that releasing a movie amid massive uncertainty presents a bold risk, I would say. But he's confident that, quote, slow and steady wins the race, end quote, during a pandemic, and feels strongly that it will continue to draw audiences as it expands to the U.S. next weekend. Quote, Canadians might be too nice to go to Unhinged, end quote, Gill said. He's optimistic that the movie centering on a young woman who was harassed by an unstable stranger after a road rage altercation will have a strong appeal in the U.S. He notes 82% of Americans have experienced road rage, the highest number in the world. Okay. Why am I talking about this? Because this is not the movie podcast. I know, even though I talk about a ton of movies on here. Because Unhinged should have been a video on demand movie anyway. I get it. They were going to try to get it on the theaters, and it's a good one to gamble on because the movie probably sucks. But to talk about it's going to do well in the U.S., where we're the most infected country in the world, and because we've experienced the most road rage in the world, is ridiculous. And here, folks, you see the difference between Solstice Studios and Universal. Universal would have put this out months ago on video on demand, right behind Trolls World Tour. And Unhinged would be on your television set right now. It probably would be on Netflix by now, or something else. Shudder, maybe. Though it's unusual for a new movie to premiere in Canada before it hits the theater stateside, studios have all but thrown away the conventional playbook given the unconventional times. Indoor theaters in New York City, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and New Jersey, among the biggest movie-going markets in the country, are still closed, without a set date to reopen. AMC, Cinemark, and Regal, the largest cinema chains in the world, haven't opened most of their locations yet, but hope to be operational by a significant degree by the end of August. Currently, 1,386 of the 6,021 venues in the country are open, 316 of which are drive-ins, according to ComScore. ComScore is a market research company for theaters. Now, since cinemas were forced to shutter in March, drive-ins became a boon for the exhibition community, serving as one of the few ways for cinephiles, like myself, or those just itching to leave their houses, like college kids in Georgia, to safely watch a movie on the big screen. Pre-pandemic movies like Disney and Pixar's fantasy adventure Onward, or Universal's thriller The Invisible Man, as well as fresh offerings from smaller studios like IFC's The Wretched and David Ayer's The Tax Collector, dominated the few screens that were able to remain open. IFC Films is one of the independent studios that has continued to unveil new movies and report numbers during the pandemic, finding major success at drive-in venues. Horror offerings, such as The Wretched and The Rental, claimed a top spot at movie box office charts in recent weeks. IFC opened the sci-fi thriller Sputnik in 31 venues this weekend, generating $12,000 in ticket sales. But that wasn't the studio's highest grossing title over the last 3 days. The Rental, the directorial debut of Dave Franco, pulled in $78,000 from 144 screens. That film has been a big hit by pandemic standards, collecting $1.3 million to date. Now, see, I understand why you would release a Dave Franco movie, because he's, first thing, he's an actor trying to be a director. His brother's a very prolific director, by the way. But to do this is not a gamble for Dave Franco. In fact, this is probably the best way for him to get into a theater. Throughout the rest of August and into September, studios will continue to test the appetite for moviegoing. Now, as we've said here on this podcast before, on September 3rd, Christopher Nolan's movie Tenet is expected to go to theaters. And Fox's superhero thriller, The New Mutants, is scheduled to go on August 28th. The reception to those films could determine the path toward other major films in 2020. Like I've said, when they write the case study for 2020 in the movie industry, it's going to be measured by Tenet. And Tenet might be the film that is the death knell for theaters, showing that no matter how big the movie is, that people don't want to go to the theaters, or it can be the movie that primed the pump for people to go back to the theaters, and Christopher Nolan could save the day. But we will have to see. I don't think it's going in. It's September 3rd. And I know we're close. I still don't think they're doing it. Here's a quote. "Are moviegoers ready to return to theaters? That's the bottom line," said Jeff Bach, a box office analyst with Exhibitor Relations. "It's going to be the biggest weekend we've seen all summer in terms of how films are presented in 2020. Well, I would agree with you, Jeff Bach, but the reason this is on my podcast, on the TV podcast, is because I think this is going to signal that streaming is the way that you're going to distribute most movies from here on out, unless something major changes. And I don't think it is. And even, again, this is just my opinion, even if we get a vaccine, the damage has been done to theaters as far as it being the conventional way, the all-around agreed-upon way to consume Hollywood films. I think it only has to be a big film, like the Bond film, or Star Wars film, or maybe even Tenet, for people to go. And I don't even think people are going to go see Tenet if they release it on September 3rd. People are still debating whether they want to go to school. My nephews and my niece aren't going to college. I mean, they're in college, but they're going to be doing it. They're not going to the classroom. So I doubt they're going to the movie theater. So we will see how it goes. But like I said, folks, now's the time to invest in a good television set and a good streaming service, because that's how you're going to see your movies. Next, I didn't plan on doing this. That's why I didn't talk about it at the beginning. But I did watch Lovecraft Country, and I got to talk about it. I was going to do a recap every show like I did with Westworld. I don't think I'm going to do that with this one. In fact, I can tell you definitively. I'm 99% sure. Anyway, when we get back, it's going to be Lovecraft Country. Go get a stiff drink or your edibles or whatever you do in the meanwhile, and go to the bathroom, do whatever you do. We get to pay some bills. Be right back. Thanks for listening. I can't say it for some reason all of a sudden. It's like my mouth is stuck, Jack. I can't say Lovecraft Country anymore. What's going on with my mouth? All right, we're back. Listen, I didn't plan on recapping Lovecraft Country every week or even this week. I considered it, but some of you even asked me to in some emails. But after watching episode 1, I don't know. Those of you who listen to this podcast regularly have probably discovered by now that the network has brought on 2 great new hosts, Aaron and Priscilla, which I am sure is welcome news to those of you who are tired of listening to me all the time. So one of them may choose to do so, and I hope they do because they're both very good. But as for me, I think it's going to be just this one. So let me just get started. This will have mild, broad stroke spoilers. So if you want to watch this thing fresh, do not listen to this, okay? You've been duly warned. This is a spoiler warning. So let's go. HBO's Lovecraft Country is not particularly aimed at recreating the dread and existential anxiety of Lovecraft's works. Showrunner and creator of the show Underground, Misha Green fashioned the series from Matt Ruff's novel of the same name. As a black reclamation of the pulp plots and archetypes H.P. Lovecraft originated. Green isn't using the mythological pedigree of Ruff's novel to criticize H.P. Lovecraft's racism, though at least that doesn't seem to be the case in episode 1. Lovecraft Country, there I go, I keep getting stuck on Lovecraft Country. Well, it is more or less a fantasy mystery melodrama with pulp adventure aspirations. It's a reclamation of genre storytelling insofar as it puts black characters in roles and situations that they've historically been excluded from. But it's more honest to call it a refit rather than a reclamation because Lovecraft Country remains drearily beholden to fantasy and occult mystery conventions. Okay, let me take my analyst hat off and get to the plot. The series primarily relates the trials of black serviceman Atticus Black. He's played by Jonathan Majors. And he returns home to uncover his family's mystical heritage and clash with a sinister magic-wielding cult, all against the backdrop of 1950s segregation-era America. Majors is joined by a treasure trove of heavyweight black talent who make up the series' principal cast. That includes Journey Smollett, Jesse Smollett's more talented and very beautiful sister, who you may know from Birds of Prey if you saw that godforsaken movie, Michael K. Williams from The Wire and Boardwalk Empire, and Courtney B. Vance, most recently on American Crime Story. Okay, let's get down to it. Lovecraft Country's story begins in the middle of a dream. Our protagonist, Atticus Freeman, fights his way through the trenches during a brutal battle. He apparently was in the Korean War, which, oh, by the way, for those history buffs who aren't aware, that was the first war that was fought with integrated troops. My father was in the 92nd Infantry in World War II, which was the last all-black segregated division in the U.S. Army, or all the armed forces. A voiceover narrates for us, instructing us that this story is a boy in his dream. But more than that, it's a story of an American boy in a dream that is truly American. Now, actually, that's the narration of the Jackie Robinson story. It's a movie that was made in the 50s. Now, as we hear this narration, this battle that was just a regular Korean War battle has now turned into some sort of science fiction scene with flying saucers and Martians and all kinds of things. And a red-skinned woman descends from a flying saucer, and robots and squid-like creatures populate the battlefield. She touches down and she embraces Atticus as a creature emerges out of the battle ready to strike them dead. It's a big tentacled beast, something that would be out of a Lovecraft novel. And suddenly the creature gets split in half by somebody who strikes it dead with a bat, who happens to be, Jackie Robinson, in his Dodgers uniform, which is covered with green goo and fireworks erupting behind him. So pretty much in this first scene, we know that we can anything from this show. And by the way, the special effects were awesome. They were very good. We snap back to the harsh light of day in the 1950s where we see Atticus in the back of a segregated bus. This is the first of numerous reminders we'll get in this episode about the endemic racism accepted by all. As the bus rattles out of the godforsaken South, Atticus flips the bird to the Welcome to Kentucky sign on the side of the road. And the bus breaks down unexpectedly, Leaving the passenger stranded, Atticus and another black passenger opt to walk rather than take the alternative travel sourced by the bus driver. It's a pickup truck owned by a local white man, since it's clear from a few sideways glances that they would not be welcome on this truck. It's at this point that you should start putting yourself on high alert that Lovecraft Country is not going to do anything subtly. It's going to be very heavy on everything it does. I don't think it trusts the audience, but I'll get to that in a moment. As the pair walks, Atticus and this older black woman who he met on the bus, Atticus tells her that he's heading home to Chicago after receiving a very odd letter from his father, Montrose. He's also asked about the book he's reading, A Princess of Mars by Edgar Rice Burroughs. Now, Atticus, we learn he's a bookworm at heart. He's very excited to share his passion about these science fiction novels he reads, but it's met with skepticism when he tries to defend that one of the protagonists of the book is an ex-Confederate soldier named John Carter. So that kind of sets the tone for where we are in this series. Cut to the south side of Chicago, where Atticus is going to visit his Uncle George and Aunt Hippolyta. I always thought it was Hippolyta, but that's what they call her on the show, so I'll call her that. Either way, it's a ham-handed reference to the Queen of the Amazons. Later on, Atticus, who they call Tick, and his Uncle George meet in George's makeshift travel guide office. Think Green Book. That's what George does, is put together a book so black people can travel safely in the South. And it's at this point that Atticus reveals the specifics of the letter that he got from his father. Montrose believes that he's finally found answers to his late wife's, that's Atticus's mother's, ancestors, and that Atticus has a secret birthright that he is owed. Montrose indicates that he's gone looking for those answers in what Atticus refers to as Lovecraft Country, and he believes that it's in Arkham, Massachusetts. But George quickly looks at the letter and realizes that because of Montrose's messy writing, that Montrose actually went to Ardham, Massachusetts, and not Arkham, like in Gotham City. Now, Tick then goes to his father's favorite bar, and it's revealed, he finds out that before he returned, the younger Freeman brother went willingly with a white, well-dressed woman in a top-of-the-line silver-colored car. Now, as day turns into night, there's a block party on the south side, and we meet Letty Lewis, who is played by Journey Smollett, and her sister Ruby. Ruby is a natural performer, taking a page out of Sister Rosetta Tharpe's playbook as she makes quick work of a few songs, including a whole lot of shaking going on. And it's a really good scene. It is a very good scene, but it doesn't have a whole lot to do with the plot. We just find out that Letty has nowhere to stay. So she wants to go and visit her brother. Back to Atticus and George. Atticus thumbs through an atlas featuring Dee's drawings. Dee is his cousin, which includes symbols that indicate clan haunts and safe havens for black travelers. It's the map they use for this travel guide. And it's during that conversation that they decide that they're going to drive to Ardham together to go to try to find Montrose. But before they leave, Tick goes over to his father's home hoping to find clues. In the Alexander Dumas novels that Montrose loves, Dumas, by the way, was a mulatto Frenchman. Many people don't know that, who wrote The Three Musketeers and The Man in the Iron Mask and The Count of Monte Cristo. Anyway, instead of finding clues, Tick finds his father's gun, which will come in handy later, and he makes a call to a yet unnamed woman who tells him that he should never have left Korea. And he's calling Korea. Now, how he can make a call to Korea with operator assistance without discussion of who's paying for the call is beyond me. But I digress. I guess they didn't think that was important. I did. Anyway, in the morning, Atticus finds Letty packing her things into George's car. She's decided she wants to hitch a ride with them as they go to Ardham to go to her brother's house. So that's what he does. So when they go off on their road trip, it takes you through all kinds of segregated country, and there is a montage with some narration from James Baldwin in the background as we see all of these examples of blatant racism and segregation. Now, I love James Baldwin. In fact, he's probably my favorite writer. And I like to listen to him speak. His eloquence is seldom matched, and it's a poignant montage. It is. But I have to believe that this is inserted to make sure that the audience understands the level of oppression that existed in this time in post-Korean War, America. Now, it's rather ham-handed. I know I've used that expression already, but it's hard for it, and I think it's a little bit overdone. But in talking to some of my friends who are not familiar with the history, I guess it needed to be done because a lot of them were very surprised at some of the images here, and it was very poignant to them. I thought it was a little bit too much, not that it wasn't real, but the huge Aunt Jemima billboard after the guy is making fun of him and mocking him, trying to, doing this ape thing while they're trying to pump gas, all of that stuff together was just too much in one spot. That's all. Anyway, the trio decides to make a stop based on George's recommendation. The dinette George suggests now has a different sign out in front. When they go to sit down in it, they discover now it's under white ownership, not the black ownership that George had assumed it had been. And in a curious twist, George shrugs it off. So what? It's under new management. They have every right to sit down and get a hot meal. That's what he argues, which is very true. And now I don't want to nitpick again. However, this is the same George that prepares a version of the Green Book, which tells black people how to travel through the South safely. So, in other territories safely, and how to avoid violence in instances of racism. So I kind of found it unbelievable that of the three of them, George was the one who ready to do the social justice stand right there and say, we're going to sit down here and eat in this diner. He's the Green Book guy. Okay. He should know better. But anyway, Tick and Letty are the ones who seem to understand the level of danger. And once they realize that the place was painted white because it has burn marks on it, because they probably burned out the original black owners, they decided to leave. So they leave during a heated car chase with Letty at the wheel. And it's a good chase. It's a good car chase. It's a lot of action there. To make a long story short, before this gang of rednecks who are shooting at them can catch up to them, the mysterious silver car comes and blocks the shooters from them. And you see a mysterious young white woman get out of the car, actress Abby Lee, who apparently is the person that Montrose probably left with, and we find out more about them at the end of this episode. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to stop right there because this episode was far too much in it for me to go blow by blow and bore you with my description when you could watch it yourselves and see that it was better. But let me give you my impressions of the show. Well, I think the special effects were fantastic. I think it was very well done, very well acted. I have nothing bad or critical to say about the production. It was superlative, which is everything I expect from HBO. That said, I did not read the book. Let me give you that caveat. That's a big asterisk, okay? But this, at being somebody who is probably a little bit older than this audience that's listening to this podcast, and somebody who grew up with relatives who went through the South and situations similar to what happened in Lovecraft Country. And I understand that this is a fictional narrative. So, you have to condense events. I get it. But it was just a little bit too much for me. It was. It wasn't, and I love Watchmen, so don't get me wrong. I'm a fantasy guy. I'm all into that, but it just did not, there was something off on this narrative to me. Now, what I understand the way it's going to progress now is it's almost going to be like the X-Files, I believe. I think it's going to be more episodic than a long running narrative. Now, if this is a long running narrative, I would probably get into it. I have a feeling it's going to switch gears and I'm really not going to like it as much. I will watch this whole thing. Don't get me wrong. It was as critical as I sound like I'm being. This television is in the top 5% of all the television that's out there. Let me say that too. But and it probably suffers a little bit by the high bar that I set for it. I thought I was going to see more than I did. It started off with a bang. That dream in the beginning was quite good. But we'll see. We will see. But because of all those reasons I just gave you, or the reasons I just gave you, you'll be happy to hear that I will not be recapping Lovecraft Country anymore on this show. But like all shows that I don't give 5 stars to, I still tell you to watch it if I think it was worth, it's good television. I think this is good television. It's just not what I think what I want out of it. But this is some good television, and you should watch it. So with that, I'd like to thank you for listening to the GSMC Television Podcast. We're brought to you by the mighty GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write us a nice review. Even in spite of me, write us a nice 5-star review. It really helps us. We'd like the show to grow. Also, if you could please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, we would appreciate it. And remember to email me at podcasthoward@gmail.com. I'd like to hear any requests that you have for me on the show, any shows you'd like me to cover. I would be happy to do so. But also let me know what you think about Lovecraft Country. I really want to hear what you think about it because I was probably way too hard on the show. And I read all email on the show. Listen, I know we're on some strange and challenging times right now. We need to pull through this together. We're still in a worldwide pandemic, so please remember to wash your hands, limit your personal and close interaction with each other if you can, wear a mask when you go out of the house, please, and have a safe and fun weekend. Until we meet again, please dream with care. Jack and I love you guys. Be kind to one another. Thank you again for listening. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Television Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.